I raised a boy who wasn't mine. I loved him. I sacrificed for him. I watched him grow into a man who thanks me, but doesn't know me. Not really. Because I'm not his father. I'm just the man whose body gave life to the vessel his soul needed. I need to tell you something. Something that happened to me 15 years ago. Something that still keeps me awake at night. Something that makes me question everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what comes after. My son told me he wasn't my son when he was 4 years old. He said his real name was Stephen, that he had a wife named Sarah, that he owned a repair shop in Portland, and that he was murdered outside his own home. I'm a chemistry professor at a community college in a small town called Riverside, about 80 miles from Portland. I've lived here my whole life. I've never owned a repair shop, and my wife, Catherine, and I named our son Timothy. That was 15 years ago. And I still don't know if the child I raised is really mine, or if something else, someone else, is living inside his body. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Robert Mason, and I teach organic chemistry at Riverside Community College. It's a quiet life. A good life, the kind where nothing extraordinary ever happens. My wife, Catherine, was a homemaker, and we'd been married for 30 years when our 6th child was born. I was 53 years old when Timothy came into our lives. We thought we were done having children. Our other 5, 3 boys and 2 girls, were already grown, some with families of their own. But then Catherine got pregnant. And at her age, at my age, it felt like a miracle, a blessing from God. The pregnancy was difficult. I won't lie about that. There were complications the doctors couldn't quite explain. Catherine spent weeks on bed rest. And when Timothy was finally born on December 12, 1983, it was by emergency cesarean section. In those days, that was a much bigger deal than it is now. But when I held him, when I looked into his tiny face, all the worry melted away. He was perfect, beautiful, and he was ours. For the first year, everything was normal, Timothy. We called him Timmy, grew like any baby should. He learned to crawl, to walk, to babble his first words. Catherine and I were exhausted. Being older parents isn't easy, but we were happy. Then, around 18 months old, something changed. Timmy started saying things, strange things, things that made us uncomfortable. At first, we thought it was just a phase. You know how kids are. They say the weirdest stuff. But it wasn't a phase, and it didn't stop. Every morning, he would wake up crying, pointing at the windows, at the walls, at everything around him. And he would say, "This isn't my house. This isn't my home. I want to go home." We'd try to calm him down, tell him he was home, but he would shake his head violently, tears streaming down his face. "No, no, no, my house has big windows, glass windows everywhere, and I have a car, a white car." We didn't have a car. We had an old pickup truck that barely ran. Catherine would hold him, rock him, whisper reassurances, but nothing worked. He would pull away from her, look at her with these eyes, these old knowing eyes, and say, "You're not my mother." I can't describe what that does to a parent hearing your own child reject you like that. Catherine cried herself to sleep for weeks, but it got worse. By the time Timmy was 2.5, he started talking about his death. "They shot me," he would say, so matter of fact, like he was talking about the weather. It was raining, and I was in my car, and my friend, his name was Brian. Brian shot me in the head, and then they burned my body, and threw me in the river. He would describe it in detail no child his age should even be capable of imagining. He talked about the pain, the blood, the moment everything went dark. He talked about watching his own body being carried away, watching strangers cry over him. At night, I would lie awake next to Catherine, listening to her quiet sobbing, and I would think, what kind of child is this? What kind of thing have we brought into our home? We took him to doctors, child psychologists, priests. Everyone had theories, trauma from the difficult birth, overactive imagination, something he'd seen on television. But none of it made sense. We didn't have a television, and Timmy had never been traumatized by anything. The psychologists told us to ignore it, that if we didn't give it attention, he'd stop, but he didn't stop. If anything, he got more insistent, more desperate. He started packing his clothes every day. We'd find him stuffing his little shirts and pants into bags, into pillowcases, into anything he could carry. And then he would stand by the front door, waiting for someone to take him home. "I need to go to Portland," he would say. "My family is there. My wife, Sarah, my kids, they're waiting for me." One day, when he was about 3.5, we were driving through town, and Timmy suddenly screamed from the back seat, "Stop! Stop the car!" I pulled over, heart pounding, thinking something was wrong. But Timmy was pointing out the window at Highway 84, the road that leads to Portland. "That's the way," he said, his little finger trembling. "That's the road to my shop. I used to drive that road every day." Catherine turned around in her seat, her face pale. "Timmy, honey, you've never been to Portland." "Yes, I have," he insisted. And there was such conviction in his voice, such certainty. "I lived there. I worked there. I died there." That night, after we put Timmy to bed, Catherine and I sat at the kitchen table, and we had a conversation we never thought we'd have. "What if," Catherine whispered, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, "what if he's telling the truth?" I wanted to tell her she was being ridiculous, that this was impossible, that there had to be a logical explanation. But I couldn't, because deep down I was starting to believe it too. The breaking point came a few weeks later. Timmy had been particularly agitated that day, crying, refusing to eat, insisting over and over that he needed to go home. Finally, exhausted and desperate, I made a decision that would change everything. "Fine," I said, my voice harder than I intended. Show me where this home is, and I'll take you there." Timmy's eyes lit up, and for the first time in months, he smiled. Catherine wanted to come, but I told her to stay home with our other kids. I didn't know what we were going to find, and I wanted someone to stay behind just in case. Just in case of what? I didn't know. I put Timmy in the truck, and we drove toward Portland. He sat in the passenger seat, so small his feet didn't touch the floor, but he looked determined, focused, like a man on a mission. "Where am I going?" I asked him, and he pointed ahead, his little hand steady. "Just drive to Portland, I'll show you when we get there." The drive took about an hour and a half, and the whole time, Timmy stared out the window, silent, almost peaceful. When we reached the outskirts of Portland, he started giving directions. "Turn here. No, not that street. This one. Yes. Keep going." I followed his instructions, even though every logical part of my brain was screaming that this was insane. We drove through neighborhoods I'd never been to, past shops and houses that meant nothing to me. Then we turned onto a street called Hawthorne Boulevard, and Timmy said, "Stop here." I pulled over, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. We were in front of a small electronics repair shop. The windows were dusty, and there was a closed sign hanging crooked on the door. Above the door, in faded letters, it said, Steve's Electronics. Timmy unbuckled his seatbelt and tried to open the door. This is it. This is my shop. I got out of the truck, my legs barely holding me up, and I walked to the shop window. Inside, I could see old equipment, shelves of parts, and behind the counter, there was a photograph, a framed photograph of a man. A man who looked nothing like my son, but who Timmy was staring at, like he was looking in a mirror. The shop was closed, but there was a phone number on the door. With trembling hands, I wrote it down. When we got home, I didn't tell Catherine what happened, not right away. I needed to know more. I needed to be sure. I called the number the next day, and a woman answered, her voice tired, sad. Hello? I'm calling about the shop on Hawthorne. Steve's Electronics? Is it still open? There was a long pause. No, I'm sorry, the shop's been closed for almost 4 years now, my husband. He passed away. My heart stopped. I'm so sorry, can I ask what happened? He was murdered, she said, and I could hear the pain in her voice, even after all those years. August 28th, 1983. Someone shot him in our driveway. We never found out exactly why, but the police think it was someone he knew, someone he trusted. August 28th, 1983. Timothy was born December 12th, 1983. 3.5 months later. Ma'am, I said, my voice barely a whisper, what was your husband's name? Stephen Reynolds, but everyone called him Steve. I hung up the phone and sat down hard on the kitchen floor. Catherine found me there 20 minutes later, staring at nothing, the phone still in my hand. I don't remember much of the next few days. They're a blur of phone calls, conversations, and disbelief. I called the woman back. Her name was Sarah Reynolds, and I told her everything. Everything Timmy had been saying. Everything he claimed to remember. She didn't hang up on me. She didn't call me crazy. Instead, she started crying. I've been praying, she said, praying for a sign. Any sign that Steve was still out there somehow, that he was okay. We arranged to meet the following week. When Sarah Reynolds walked into our home, Timmy was playing in the living room with his toys. He looked up, saw her standing in the doorway, and dropped everything. He ran to her. Sarah, he said, and his voice cracked, sounded older, deeper. Sarah, it's me. She knelt down, tears streaming down her face, and looked into his eyes. Steve. And my 3-year-old son, my Timothy, said words that no 3-year-old should know. I'm sorry I left you. I'm sorry I didn't get to say goodbye. Sarah brought photographs, dozens of them, pictures of Stephen Reynolds, his life, his family. She showed Timmy, showed him pictures of people he'd never met. He identified every single one. That's my son Jake, and that's Emily. She was only 2 when I died. That's my sister Rebecca. She lived behind the music store. That's my dad's car, the blue sedan. Sarah asked him questions, personal questions, things only she and Stephen would know, and Timmy answered them all. Where did we go the day before you died? We went to the county fair near Salem. You sat on the hood of the car and ate funnel cake. You got powdered sugar all over your shirt. And we laughed because you looked like you'd been in a snowstorm. Sarah sobbed, her whole body shaking. No one knew that. No one. Just me and Steve. Over the next few weeks, Sarah brought more people. Stephen's family, his friends, his children. They tested Timmy over and over, trying to prove he was just a clever kid who'd heard stories. But he knew things. Impossible things. He knew where Stephen kept his spare keys. He knew the name of Stephen's first dog. He knew the exact spot where Stephen proposed to Sarah. He described the moment of his death in perfect detail. The rain, the betrayal, the friend named Brian Wilson, who'd shot him over a business dispute, the smell of gasoline as they burned his body, the cold water of the Willamette River as they dumped his remains. The police had never made that information public. The hardest part, the part that still breaks my heart, was watching Timmy pull away from us. He stopped calling me Dad. He started calling me Robert. He stopped hugging Catherine. He would sit at the dinner table, quiet, distant, like he was a guest in our home, just waiting for the moment he could leave. "I don't belong here," he told me one night, when I tucked him into bed. "I'm sorry, Robert. I know you and Catherine are good people, but I don't belong here. I have a family, and they need me." "You're a child," I said, trying not to cry. "You're 3 years old." "No," he said, and his eyes were so old, so tired. "I'm 31, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I died, and somehow I ended up here in this body, and I don't understand it, but I know it's true." We sent him to doctors, specialists, people who studied cases like this. A researcher named Dr. James Morrison came all the way from Virginia to interview Timmy, to study him. He called it a case of soul replacement, said it was one of the rarest phenomena in the world. Most reincarnation cases, Dr. Morrison explained, sitting in our living room with pages and pages of notes, involve children who remember bits and pieces of a past life, but they integrate those memories with their current identity. They become a blend of both lives. He looked at Timmy, who was coloring in the corner, quiet, detached. But Timothy or Stephen, whichever name we use, he didn't integrate. His previous life completely overtook this one. It's as if Stephen Reynolds' soul found Timothy's body and took it over. "What does that mean?" Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Morrison shook his head. "It means the soul that was supposed to be born in Timothy's body, wherever it went, it's not here." That thought haunted me, still haunts me, somewhere out there. Was there supposed to be another soul? Another person? Someone who never got the chance to live because Stephen Reynolds took their place? Timmy, I still call him Timmy, even though he prefers Stephen, grew up torn between two worlds. Sarah Reynolds wanted him with her, wanted her husband back, even if he was in the body of a child. But legally, we were his parents. He was our son, and the courts had no idea how to handle a case like this. We made compromises. Timmy spent time with Sarah, with Stephen's children, who were now older than he was. Can you imagine that? Being a father to kids who are teenagers while you're still in elementary school. Catherine and I, we did our best, but it was never the same. Every time we looked at Timmy, we saw the child we'd lost, the son who'd been replaced by someone else's soul. When Timmy was 10, we sent him to boarding school in California, not because we didn't love him, but because we thought maybe distance would help. Maybe he could figure out who he was supposed to be. He excelled in school, brilliant, driven like Stephen had been. He studied business, psychology, anything that might help him understand what had happened to him. Today, Timothy Mason, or Stephen Reynolds, or whoever he really is, he's 28 years old, he's a professor at a university in Oregon. He teaches philosophy and religious studies, courses on consciousness, identity, the soul. He visits sometimes, always polite, always respectful. He brings Catherine flowers, asks about my work, but there's a distance there, a gap that can never be closed. Sometimes, late at night, he'll sit with me on the porch, and we'll talk, really talk, and he'll tell me about his nightmares. I still see it, he says, staring out at the darkness, the moment I died, the look on Brian's face, the betrayal, and then the darkness, and then nothing, just floating, waiting, and then suddenly I was being born, being pushed into a body that wasn't mine, and I couldn't stop it, couldn't fight it. And by the time I was aware enough to understand what had happened, I was already here, already living a life that wasn't supposed to be mine. Do you? I asked him once. Do you ever feel like Timothy? Like the child Catherine and I had? He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "No, I'm sorry, Robert. I don't. I wish I did, for your sake, for Catherine's sake, but I don't. I remember being Stephen. I remember my life, my death, and nothing before December 12th, 1983. It's like Timothy never existed, like I erased him just by being born." That was 15 years ago that this all started. Catherine passed away 3 years ago, cancer. And even at the end, she would look at Timmy, at the man he'd become, and she would cry for the son she never really got to know. Timmy, Professor Timothy Mason now, he visits her grave every year on her birthday, leaves flowers, says a prayer. But I know he's not praying for Catherine. He's praying for Stephen's wife Sarah, who died 5 years ago, who never got to grow old with the man she loved. And me, I'm 71 now, retired, living alone in the same house where we raised 6 children, where we brought home a miracle baby who turned out to be someone else entirely. Late at night, I think about that soul, the one that was supposed to be Timothy, the one that never got the chance to live. Where did it go? Did it find another body? Is it out there somewhere, living a different life, wondering why it feels incomplete? Or is it still waiting, angry, wanting back what was stolen from it? I don't know, and I don't think I'll ever know. But I'll tell you this, and I want you to really hear me. When someone tells you they remember a past life, when a child says they used to be someone else, don't laugh it off. Don't dismiss it as imagination or fantasy, because maybe, just maybe, they're telling you the truth. And that truth, that reality that souls can die and come back, that they can take over bodies that weren't meant for them, that death might not be the end, but just a transition into something else, something we can't control. That truth is more terrifying than any ghost story, any horror movie, any nightmare you've ever had. Because it means we're not who we think we are. It means our children might not be ours. It means the person looking back at you in the mirror might be someone else entirely, someone who died decades ago, someone who's wearing your face like a mask. It means that life and death, and consciousness, and identity, everything we think we understand, it's all a lie, or at least, it's far more complicated, far more fragile than we ever imagined. And you know what the worst part is? I'd do it all again. Because even if Timothy wasn't really my son, even if Stephen Reynolds stole his body, his life, his chance to exist, I still love him, I still care about him, and I still lie awake at night, hoping he finds peace, hoping he figures out who he's supposed to be. That's what love is, I guess, loving someone even when they're not who you thought they were. Even when every logical part of your brain says to let go, to move on, to stop caring. I can't stop caring. And I can't stop wondering when I die, when my soul leaves this body, where will I go? Will I get to choose? Or will I be pulled into some random infant, forced to live a life that isn't mine, forced to erase someone else just by existing? I don't have answers. None of us do. But I have this story, this truth, and I'm sharing it with you because you need to know, you need to understand that the world is stranger, darker, and more mysterious than you think. Be careful what you pray for. We prayed for a son in our old age, and God gave us one. But he never said whose soul would come with it. He never promised that the child we held would be ours to keep. Sometimes the greatest blessings are also the greatest curses. And sometimes The person you love most in the world is a stranger wearing a familiar face. That's my story. That's my truth. And if you don't believe me, that's okay. I didn't believe it either, until it happened to me. But do me a favor if your child ever looks at you with old eyes and says, "You're not my real parent," don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it. Because maybe, just maybe, they're right. And that thought, that possibility, that's the kind of horror that never goes away.